Welcome to Daily Variety, your daily dose of news and analysis for entertainment industry insiders. It's Monday, October 6, 2025. I'm your host, Cynthia Littleton. I am co-editor-in-chief of Variety alongside Ramin Satuda. I'm in LA, he's in New York, and Variety has reporters around the world covering the business of entertainment. In today's episode, we'll talk with Rebecca Rubin for our box office segment. Taylor Swift was hot at the weekend box office. Dwayne Johnson and the Smashing Machine, not so much. Rebecca breaks it all down. And then we'll hear from our theater editor, Gordon Cox, on who made the cut for this year's 10 Broadway Stars to Watch list. But before we get to that, here are a few headlines just in this morning that you need to know. A new day begins for CBS News under the new David Ellison regime. Barry Weiss has been named editor-in-chief of CBS News. Paramount has acquired Weiss's digital media startup, The Free Press, for an undisclosed price. To her credit, Weiss, in her memo to CBS News staffers, addressed head-on the concerns that many have with her taking a high perch at the vaunted news organization. Weiss laid out a list of 10 core journalism values that she believes in the memo. Number 1 was, quote, journalism that reports on the world as it actually is, end quote. Number 10 is, quote, journalism that understands that the best way to serve America is to endeavor to present the public with the facts first and foremost, end quote. Everyone in media, including Variety, will keep a close watch on CBS News' content in the coming weeks. One headline from late last week you might have missed: Mexican superstar Eugenio Derbez and his wife and family have pulled together an interesting production venture. They are all reality TV stars in Spanish-language media. Together, the Derbez family has more than 180 million social media followers. That is a very powerful launchpad for entertainment aimed at Spanish-speaking audiences. Interesting to see the Derbezes finding a way to harness that. And finally, in news that will excite a great many people, Rush is reuniting. Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson have decided to soldier on despite the death of drummer Neil Peart in 2020. All of those stories and so much more can be found on Variety.com right now. Now we turn to conversations with Variety journalists about news and trends in show business. If it's Monday, we're talking box office with Rebecca Rubin, our senior film and media reporter. Taylor Swift delivered an unexpected windfall to the multiplexes with her surprise album release party film for The Life of a Showgirl. Meanwhile, A24 stumbled with the debut of The Smashing Machine. Rebecca Rubin, here we are again. It was a big weekend at the box office because of 2 words: Taylor Swift. There's a lot to talk about with the official release party for her Life of a Showgirl film that went into theaters this weekend. I want to start, though, by asking you about, because I think it's established that she is a genius of all media and the absolute genius of marketing of all time. Do you think it was smart that she only announced this 2 weeks ago, that people hadn't bought their tickets months in advance, that there was a surprise element to that? Do you think that drove excitement?
There's definitely an unknowable quantity. If it could have made even more money had she announced this a month ago, put tickets on sale a month ago. But that being said, to have made $33 million domestically and roughly $46 million globally in just 3 days is a very impressive feat. And that is because it has been pretty minimally promoted outside of her social media feeds. It's not like it's had this grand marketing push from a studio behind it. Again, she partnered with AMC Theaters to distribute it, and so it does really speak to her singular power right now to mobilize her fan base. What movie theater owners have been saying for years now is that movies that are doing really well are things that feel like events, and you have to be there, you're missing out, and she knows she can create that kind of environment with movie theaters.
Tell me, I think we can make assumptions about who showed up, but what does the data tell you about who showed up for this?
I'm sure it's a surprise to none that the audience was mostly women. I think it was about 70% female. Again, no surprise, it was rapturously received and it got a rare A+ grade on CinemaScore. Unfortunately, there won't be repeat viewings for the most part because it's only going to be in theaters this weekend. So they won't have the Eras Tour, which was her concert film that played in theaters 2 years ago, was a huge success, and people went to see that multiple times, and it ended up becoming the highest grossing concert film of all time.
I suspect she will find a very lucrative deal with a streaming service near you very soon.
In terms of the rollout, Taylor Swift does nothing by accident, and so I'm sure she thought about the pros and cons of giving it a longer runway or having it play in theaters longer. That being said, movie theater owners always want movies to play in theaters longer, especially when something is making $33 million in North American theaters. That's a significant amount of money.
Rebecca, let's move on to The Smashing Machine, which was, I think, a surprise for A24 and a surprise for Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah, if it were not for Taylor Swift, this would have been a really, really bleak weekend at the box office because The Smashing Machine bombed with $6 million. And heading into the weekend, projections were closer to 15 million, although some thought it might open to 8 million, but it didn't even reach that level. And this is the lowest opening weekend for Dwayne Johnson of his career, and part of the disconnect there, I think, is that he is in a type of role that audiences are not necessarily used to seeing him in. He is best known for family-friendlier franchises like Jumanji or Fast and Furious, and so this role, which is much more in the art house lane and much more dramatic, was at odds with how audiences know him.
He's playing a pioneering MMA fighter who dealt with all kind of brain injuries in the years when this sport really, really was the Wild West for fighters, and it's a very emotional story. Was super well received in Venice. Do you see any signs that word of mouth could help get people in weekend 2 or weekend 3?
I would be pretty surprised because it got a B- cinema score, which means audiences were not particularly enthused with it. And you mentioned it premiered at Venice and A24, which spent pretty handsomely on this movie. It has a $50 million budget, which makes it one of their most expensive films. They've been positioning it as this art house film. It's a performance by Dwayne Johnson that could land him in the Oscar race. But then when you look at the audience breakdown of who actually went to see the movie, it's not the art house crowd at all. It's men and younger boys who are his target demographic for all of his other films that he releases. And so the audience here was 68% male.
I love your analysis, Rebecca. Tell us about weekend 2 for One Battle After Another.
I think it's safe to say the studio is probably hoping for a better hold. Ticket sales declined by 53% from its debut. It earned roughly $10 million this weekend, which by all accounts is pretty standard, but this movie was very expensive, as we discussed last weekend, and it needed to have a better hold if it wants to stick around in theaters and earn enough money to justify its budget. But what will be interesting to keep an eye on is international, because right now it appears to be holding better at the international box office. Ticket sales were only down roughly 20% in overseas markets, and so they could make up a bit of ground there. We've seen a few movies this year that really over-indexed internationally, and if that's the case, Warner Brothers likely will still lose money on this title, but maybe it won't be as much if it's able to really leg out overseas.
Anything else about this weekend that you think is interesting?
One other thing that caught my eye is Disney re-released Avatar: The Way of Water, and it made $10 million this weekend, which is pretty decent for a re-release of a movie that only came out a few years ago. And of course, they are bringing it back to stoke excitement for the third Avatar movie, Fire and Ash, which opens in December. And of course, the first two each grossed $2 billion and are two of the highest grossing movies in history. And so it'll be really interesting to see if James Cameron can deliver another $2 billion blockbuster, which would be another box office record.
No pressure, James Cameron. Thank you, Rebecca. As always, so much to look forward to. Now we turn to Gordon Cox, Variety's longtime editor of theater, or as we call it, legit. Variety is just out with its 10 Broadway Stars to Watch feature. Gordon talks us through how he assembled this year's lineup. Gordon Cox, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Cynthia. Nice to be here.
As always, you are our chief correspondent for all things legit, all things Rialto, all things main stem, all things Great White Way. That's my string of synonyms for Broadway. And as always, once a year, we ask you to stop and find 10 Broadway Stars to Watch as part of that great franchise that we do. Gordon, you have this yearly assignment. Where do you start to assemble this list every year?
Well, I and the team of folks who put this list together every year, we've got our ear to the ground. We're trying to pay attention to the new projects that are coming up, the folks that people in the industry are excited about or that audiences are excited about. And we're sort of on the lookout for these talents that stand poised to make a splash in this coming season, in the 2025-26 season especially. Or maybe they have just come off some like giant success that stands ready to launch them into a new level of the stratosphere.
Do you take notes in the middle of shows, like watch this person take third in the cast or fourth in the cast?
I don't do that so much anymore because usually the standouts are really memorable. I remember there's a woman named Adrienne Warren who went on to win a Tony Award for Tina Turner. And she is a woman who had like stood out already. And she was like third lead in Shuffle Along. And it was really the kind of performance where every single person in the audience sat up and went, "Who's that?" That's the kind of person we look for, the person who just is really a performer or a producer or any sort of talent on stage or behind the scenes who's doing great work.
Okay, so with a little drum roll, please, here. Gordon, will you read off the names of this year's 10 Broadway Stars to Watch?
This year's cohort is a pretty great group. It's director Liliana Blaine Cruz, writer Angelica Cherie, actor Hannah Cruz, writer Lindsay Ferrantino, agent Michael Finkel, actor Will Harrison, writer Samuel D. Hunter, the producers Brian and Dana Lee, the band The Rescues, and the actor Diego Andres Rodriguez.
Cool. Again, I know the work that went into that. Let's talk about the Rescues. That's an interesting choice. What made you pick them?
Rescues are a band that, if you do not know their name, you have probably heard one of their songs. It's been on everything from One Tree Hill to Grey's Anatomy. I was just watching a show on Netflix last week, and one of their songs showed up. They are doing their first ever musical project. It is a brewing musical adaptation of The Lost Boys, the film from the 80s, which I'm hearing great things about, by the way. And it's a vampire story. Very few people have actually seen it because it hasn't been performed yet. It's been done in closed room readings, but people are excited about it. And The Rescues are doing the score for it. And I talked to them, for this list, got to know them a little bit, and they are loving writing for the theater. They're loving writing for characters and writing specifically for situations and telling stories through lyrics and song and sound.
That's a great choice that's not obvious on its face. Listeners, we're not going to run down all 10 in the interest of time, but you can read the entire list on variety.com right now, and it's also in print as well. Give us a couple of other folks.
We've got the writer Angelica Cherie, who is the book writer on a new musical called Wanted that is about she calls it a fantasticalized version of a family story. This like story about these distant relatives who were these two outlaw sisters in the Wild West who ran around passing for white and breaking laws all over the place. So she's very excited to bring her family story to the stage.
Sounds like a very different spin on Annie Get Your Gun, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then we've got someone like Liliana Blaine Cruz, who is a director who has been on Broadway once before. A few years ago, she did a production of Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth, which is surreal and very strange. And some people loved that production and some people were less excited about it because it's a weird show to do. I was one of the folks who loved it, and she is now making what I think will be a really big Broadway splash with a new musical adaptation of Purple Rain that she is working on with Brandon Jacobs Jenkins, who is the Tony-winning, MacArthur-winning playwright. He's one of our best playwrights. And if anyone is going to do something really interesting with Purple Rain and this reimagining of the film story. It's going to be Brandon and it's going to be Liliana who's on this list.
How about among the actors on the list?
Well, there is a woman named Hannah Cruz, who's an actor. She has played Angelica on the Hamilton National Tour. She made her Broadway debut in kind of a featured role in Suffs recently. But in more recent months, she has gotten these two roles that really seem poised to catapult her career to new heights. She got cast in the very starry Richard Linklater film version of Merrily We Roll Along, which is, one of those durational filming things that she'll be working on for the next 15 years. And we'll see it in, 2040.
He loves those long, long running movies.
And similarly, she is playing a notable role in the upcoming and very exciting revival of Chess on Broadway. Chess is sort of a beloved, written by the two men who wrote most of the music for ABBA. It flopped on Broadway. It has what many people consider to be one of the best Broadway scores that we've got. And so it's very exciting to have that show back for people who love it like me. And it's got a great cast with Leah Michele and Aaron Tveit. And Hannah is joining them in this story about the Cold War and about chess and about, of course, there's a love triangle or really a love quadrangle. It's an exciting project to be a part of. And that plus, I feel like the Linklater project are really setting her up to go on to do some really exciting things.
You are making me excited about the upcoming Broadway season. Let me step back and ask you, Gordon, you've covered Broadway for so long. How is the business doing in the big picture sense? We all know the pandemic took a huge toll. How would you say the mood and the feeling on Broadway is right now here in 2025?
In some ways, Broadway is doing the best it's done since the pandemic. Last year, we had a huge season with Broadway grosses. Attendance got close to, but not quite, the record that was set in 2018, 2019. And so that's something to be excited about. People were excited to go see shows. A lot of the big starry plays attracted a whole lot of money, and a lot of buzz. So there were projects that people were very excited about. But at the same time, an ongoing thread, and this has been a concern since the end of lockdown and has really grown in prominence in terms of how many people are talking about it and how many people are struggling with it. The idea that the Broadway business model is getting harder and harder to make work as costs continue to go up and up. How do you balance spiking ticket prices with concerns about accessibility? People are starting to realize that there are some ways of working that have endured over decades at this point that have kind of codified and seem to be really just making it harder and harder for a Broadway show to make money.
And let's never forget, these are the hardest working people in show business. 8 shows a week, and it is a very hard gig. But boy, there is just nothing better when you come out of a great Broadway show and you're just tripping down the theater district. That's when you know you're alive.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think that's what we're celebrating with our Business of Broadway event every year.
Listeners, while you are playing this, Variety will be hosting its annual Business of Broadway breakfast in New York. Gordon Cox, Brent Lang, and others will be there, celebrate the 10 Broadway Stars to watch list, and we will even have a visit from Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves to talk about their new production of Waiting for Godot and some other fun stuff. So can't wait to hear all about it, Gordon. As always, thank you for working so hard on behalf of Variety.
Thank you.
As we close out today's episode, here's a few things we're watching for. I'm working from Midtown Manhattan this week because Variety is hosting a few events timed to Advertising Week. I'm looking forward to connecting with great sources that I don't get to see all the time, and there is no better time in the city than early October. Variety's International Festivals team is producing digital dailies at the IBER Series Conference in Madrid and at the Rome Media Market this week. Before we go, congrats to Josh Silverman. The Mattel executive has joined Paramount Skydance as president of Global Products and Experiences. Silverman was a Marvel and Disney executive before he joined Mattel in 2022. Thanks for listening. This episode was written and reported by me, Cynthia Littleton, with contributions from Rebecca Rubin and Gordon Cox. Stick, Snicks, Hick, Picks. Please leave us a review at the podcast platform of your choice. And please tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Variety.